All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first full committee meeting of the year, which feels crazy because we've had meetings and we had a conference, but we haven't had a full policy committee meeting yet. Um, Thank you all for joining us. I think we've got some exciting stuff for you today, so I am happy to have so many people joining in. Welcomes. So most of you probably know, but if you don't, my name is Laura Monagudo. I am a policy and program manager with Ed Systems. And Emily and I facilitate the policy committee. So my question for y'all today, and we can throw this in the chat. I am going to Florida next week, so I was thinking warm weather on the brain. So I was wondering what warm weather activities are folks excited for? My thing that I'm excited about next week is I'm gonna go on a kayak tour in the Florida mangroves. So I mean I just like kayaking in general because it's active, but it's also chill if you want it to be. But I'm interested to hear what folks are excited for. Also share your name and organization and stuff too, but mainly warm weather. Um, Emily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to. Hey everyone, great to see folks. Emily Ruska, also with Ed Systems. I am excited for walks along the lake. I live really close to the lake in the city, and that's on purpose. So always love being able to go see the water. I'm a California native, so like being near a body of water is very important to me.
Some other fun things coming up. Walking around without a coat. I agree. I hate they get so bulky. They're just a pain in the butt. Amy, what do you garden?
Lots of stuff. I do a lot of native plants, but I just started vegetables last year, so really excited to get back out there.
Cool. Picnics, biking, walking the dog. That's real. I have a little tiny dog too, so when it's windy, he just looks terrified for his life. Walking the dog is a good theme, it looks like. Ooh, baseball.
I'm
Having
also
the
seeing a lot of
windows
picnics.
open. Who doesn't like a nice breeze? The lake, gardening, running, picnics. I like that a lot of people are doing picnics. I don't picnic enough. Um, all right, folks. Well, if anyone joins and wants to share more, that was exciting. I feel like now I'm inspired to go spend time outside. So today's topics, what we're going to cover, that was our welcome. And then Mamusi is going to take it off next and give us some updates on the Success Network dashboard. Some of you may have been here when he joined us earlier to discuss the Success Network dashboard. He's been hard at work and he added a bunch of new data to it. So we're excited to have him show that to you. And then we're going to have some policy and legislative updates along with some more info from the transportation work group. And then we're going to talk about what kind of things we're planning for upcoming meetings. And then we're going to wrap up. So that should be all we've got for you today. I think it's quite a good agenda we've got. I think we've got a lot of interesting stuff. So we'll start off. I'll hand it off to Mamusi. If you want to start, Mamusi, just by introducing yourself and who you are, and then we can have you teach us about all the cool stuff you've been doing with the dashboard.
Yeah, happy to. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mamusi Ntore. I'm also with Ed Systems Center, and I work as a data analyst. I'm excited to present, if you haven't yet to see, the Success Network dashboard. There's some exciting new updates, some new data that's been included, as well as some updates to the design, layout, functionality, and things like that. And so I think a big part of this effort when I joined Ed Systems was in that continuous improvement of programs and policies that exist around the state, and wanting to have not only data-informed conversations, but data-driven actions for the betterment of students. And so part of that effort, hopefully for you all to aid in your work, is the Success Network dashboard. And so some of the updates that I'm going to showcase today, in particular, looking at early college coursework data and participating students in that, is the updated design and layout, which if you're an OG to the dashboard. And if you looked at the post-secondary and remediation data, those updates have gone back and been added to those metrics as well. We've also included some aggregates for leadership communities as a whole to be able to look at regional data, as well as the ability now to overlay ICCB community college boundaries on top of the map. And so what I'll show you today is the early college participation data, which will include grade and demographic information of students taking those courses. And real quick, if you can go to the next slide, Laura, and then I'll take over from there. A couple of things that I want you to keep in mind as I kind of showcase this dashboard and the data within it is just some quick questions, like what do you notice about the data that you're seeing? Whether it's around the state, in your region, in your districts, what questions do the data generate for you? And then along with those questions, is there additional information that will be helpful to look at alongside of this? Are there other data points or other data that might provide more context? So just a couple of things that might be helpful to keep in mind as I'm showing you how to kind of navigate this tool. So with that, I will take over sharing and get us started. So the Success at Work dashboard is, again, newly added to the dashboard page. You'll see it under dashboard views with post-secondary enrollment and community college remediation. First thing you'll notice in the layout that, again, if you've seen the previous version of the dashboard that's slightly different, is not only the inclusion of a statewide percentage, that way you can compare as you're interacting with the map or with the tables on the right-hand side, you always have that comparison of the state to keep in mind, but also these tables on the right-hand side that show you all the districts in the state alphabetically, so you can kind of quickly scroll through, find a district that you're interested in, and you can see their percentage right there in the table. And there's also, again, like I said before, there's the inclusion now of community-wide aggregates. So just taking all the districts within a particular region, within a particular leadership community that are associated with the network, and including all their data together to get a community-wide aggregate number. So that's also here. I'll also show you a new way to compare communities as a whole, and we'll get into all the nuts and bolts of all that great stuff. So what is this data showing us, right? So this data is showing us students participating in early college coursework. And if you click right here to learn more about the data, you'll see what that is defined as, right? So early college credit is defined as courses where students can receive post-secondary institution credit. And that includes dual credit courses, dual enrollment courses, IB courses, AP, articulated credit courses as well. So it's an umbrella term that includes all these different types of courses. So not only can you get that view of just students that are engaging in courses that will get them credit, right, in post-secondary, we can also look particularly at students in AP and dual credit courses, which the report card reports. So all the data that you're seeing today comes from this view, comes from the report card. And so it's just hopefully a way to take some data that in some ways can be on multiple pages of or multiple tabs, right, of the report card, and kind of put it in one place. That way it's easier to navigate, easier to look at and compare together, and hopefully makes that process of analyzing what's going on in your district, as well as looking at your region and comparing other districts to yours much faster. So what you'll see is in this map, you'll see the shading across the state, as well as, like I said, this aggregate of the state as a whole. And this is showing us students in high school that are taking early college classes. So if you were to hover on a district, you'll see kind of you'll see some information about the district, like the name of the district, if they're in the Success Network, what community are they a part of? And then you'll get kind of three metrics in there. So you'll have the percentage of high school students taking early college courses, so any of those courses that I mentioned, and then, you know, kind of the actual count of students that creates that percentage. So how many high school students roughly are in this district? And this comes from the fall enrollment counts. So you may notice that some districts, I put an asterisk that there are some districts that have a discrepancy, and part of that just may be due to it's, you're taking fall high school enrollment counts and then comparing that to the number of students in early college courses, which I believe that data is collected in the spring. And so sometimes that can create some discrepancies, but I think directionally and as a whole, this is, given what we have, I think this is the most accurate measure that we can provide given the data. And so you can kind of just do a quick hover around, look at any districts depending on, ones that interest you, ones that are in your area, or ones that just kind of stand out. Maybe they have a particularly dark, shaded color and like, oh, that's interesting. I want to investigate what's going on there. If you want to affect the shading of the map and kind of look at this data a little bit differently, you can go back and use any one of these three filters. So first one is school year. So we're looking at the most recent data for 2023. We can go back and look at previous years of data. So let's say you're interested in saying, well, what did the state look like in 2019, right? That last, school year before COVID hit our schools. So we can kind of look and see what that looked like across the state. Well, what if we want to look in particular, not just at any, that broad term of early college, what if we wanted to key in particular at AP, right? We can use this filter here for early college course, click on AP and we can see what that looks like, right? And let's actually go to the most recent year. And we can see kind of around the state, we know the statewide number is 23.5%, and we can kind of see where, a lot of high participation across the state looks, where that is, right? We can switch that to dual credit and see what that looks like as well. Any one of these changes.
Mamusi, just gonna pause you for 1 second.
Sure.
There's a couple questions in the chat around overlaying community college districts, and there's a question about will the tool aggregate for a community college district, like aggregate the data, and then a question about what type of remedial data are available, and then just demonstrating the overlay as well.
Sure, yeah, so I'm getting to the overlay. I'll show that in a second. And no, to answer that question, no, you can't aggregate. Well, we can aggregate for community colleges. This does not currently. And so if that's a desire and need, that's something that definitely can be included. But at the moment, it's not. So looking at the statewide map, right? And we're looking at dual credit students. And let's say we wanted in particular to see seniors that are engaging in dual credit, right? And we can see kind of what that looks like across the state. Any one of these views that you're looking at with the map can be downloaded. If you go to the bottom where it says choose a format to download, you can download this as an image, right? And if you want to kind of cut and paste this into a presentation and just kind of look and see across different types of courses, different grades, different years, kind of what the state has looked like, there's a way to do that with this tool. Now, getting to that previous question about community colleges, right? So, and that's in particular relevant to dual credit. So right here in the top left corner, it says community college boundary map. And if you click this button, it brings up this layer control, and you can click this box where it says community college, and then it overlays the ICCB map of community college districts across the state. And so just kind of looking at that data, you can hover around and see what the associated community college is for that kind of group of districts. Yeah, and just to see, for students in dual credit in those courses, where are they likely going? Which community college are they likely attending for these classes? So that you have that ability just with this layer control button right there. If you want to remove that, just uncheck the box. And now we're back to looking specifically just at the districts. Now, some added function or some functionality within the map is the ability to look at trends for the district. So right now we're looking at a snapshot in the most recent school year, right? But if we wanted to go back and see, well, what does participation look like over the last few years? Well, we have the ability to do that by clicking into the map, right? So let's say I found a district that I'm interested in. I click on them in the map, then it's going to take me to this view, right? And so not only am I looking at the most recent year of data, I can go back and look at the previous years of data going back to 2018. So we have 6 years of data looking at trends and seeing, what has participation in dual credit looked like within a particular district. Now, we can add more districts in to compare, which is, again, one of those things I mentioned about when it comes to report card, This might take multiple clicks. This might take, opening multiple tabs, which you can do, but with the dashboard tool, it allows that process to be much more seamless and a lot faster for you. So you can click right here, this district filter, and you can add in any number of districts that you might be interested in comparing to this district. Like, let's say I want to compare 211 because it's close by, and Barrington. And so I can click in as many districts as I want to include to compare and just click apply. And now I'm looking at the trends for all 3 of these districts. And I can just compare and see, like, what's been going on in these 3 districts over the last 6 years. How have their rates compared? Have there been any closing or widening of gaps, anything like that when it comes to particular types of early college courses, which again, you can change and look at AP instead, and you can look at any number of grades. Now, as you add more districts into the table in the line chart, it can get messy, right? So like if you're adding 6, 7, 8 districts, because these are all districts that you care about, the line chart can get a little, it can get a little bit difficult to interpret. And that's why I included this table at the bottom, which allows you, if you're adding multiple districts, and I would say a sweet spot for the line chart is probably 4 to 5. But again, you have the ability to add more. And if it's hard to read the line chart, you have the table, and that again gives you the same information that's in the line chart, but a lot easier to interpret. You can download this as an image. You also have the ability to download this data that you're looking at in an Excel table for yourself. So if you click this button, it gives you the ability to download either the line chart or the table. I would recommend just downloading the table because it gives you all the metrics that you're looking at in the visualization for you. So not only the percentage, you'll see how many actual students is that, and what's the high school population of that group. You can download that into an Excel file with the districts that you selected, and it kind of gives you kind of a curated view of the districts that you care about, right? If you've, like me, looked at the Excel files that ISB provides, which are great, and which is what I use to create this dashboard, there's a lot of data in there. There's a lot of districts in there. And if you want to kind of filter and hone in on a few particular districts, this allows you to do that a lot faster and look at multiple years of data without having to download each data file from ISB's library.
Hey, Mamusi, just there was a quick question in the chat of how you changed to the line chart again.
Yeah,
so
of course.
If you could just do the toggle one more time, that'd be great.
Of course. So I'll go back to the map. And what I did was I selected a district from the map. I just clicked into the map. And not only can you select a single district from the map also has the ability, if you click and hold your mouse and kind of drag it, you can drag it over sections of the map, kind of like if you ever used a home buying tool like Zillow, you can highlight a particular section, region, group of districts. And if you do that, so I'll show that now. If you were to highlight just a few districts in a particular region and uncheck your mouse, then it automatically compares the districts that you selected in that line chart. And if you by chance selected a district that you didn't mean to, or that you don't actually want to compare that, like let's say I don't want Glenbrook to be in there anymore, I can just go to the district filter, type in the name of the district, uncheck the box, hit apply, and now I just have the districts that I was wanting. If I want to add a new district in, I can do that by just typing it in here. So that's the comparison tool, which I think is a really great way of, again, looking at not only your district or your community, but looking at comparing multiple districts at once. So I mentioned previously that the data for early college coursework not only includes information of students participating by grade, but also by different demographic groups, which is amazing because the post-secondary and remediation data unfortunately doesn't have that disaggregation, but early college coursework does, which is awesome. So if I wanted to look at that in particular, then I would go over here to the right-hand side. And I kind of gave a little explainer here in the description. It says clicking into the tables will allow you to see the breakdown of students taking these classes by demographic group. So if you go over to this table, and again, you can kind of scroll down and find a particular district that you're interested in. It's in alphabetical order, so you can just quickly scroll. If you don't want to have to search for it in the map, you can always find it here. Or there's a filter here that says find a district, and you can type in the district that you're looking for, right? So first, the way you would use this is by first unchecking all, and then typing in the district that you're interested in looking at. So let's say I wanted to explore the data for our friends in Vienna. I can type in the name there, check the box next to the district, hit apply. And now that district is isolated in the table as well as in the map. If I clicked on the district, now this is not showing data because Vienna didn't report AP data for 11th grade courses for that particular year. So if you see blanks in the table, it's one of two reasons. Either the district didn't report data for that year, or ISB suppresses any data counts less than 10. So it could be that there actually were students taking AP classes in this grade, but it was less than 10, and so it wasn't reported out to the public. So just if you see any blank spaces, anything like that, it's usually one of those two reasons. But I will say that Vienna does have great dual credit data. So we can look and see that here. So if I clicked on the district in the table, not in the map, but in the table, because if I click it in the map, that's for comparing it to another district. If I click into the table, that allows me to just key in on Vienna and look at their data and their demographics for students taking early college courses. So if I click on Vienna, either the name of the district or the percentage, it doesn't matter, but in the table, then it takes me to this view. And in this view, I'm looking just at this district, and I'm seeing in this line chart, what have been their trends over the last 6 years of these different types of early college classes. So again, early college overall, so any type of credit bearing course, and then in particular, AP and dual credit. And what you'll notice is for Vienna, all of their early college reporting is dual credit, which is why the lines are the same. But if you were to select a different district, like let's just say we wanted to select the state of Illinois, just as a comparison, you can find that here in this filter. And then you'll see if the district has reporting for each of the early college, AP, and dual credit, you'll see the trends for all three of them. Now, this is just showing the trends, right, for each of these classes. Then if you scroll down a little bit, in particular for AP and dual credit classes, we can look and see what's the makeup of students in those classes. So if I know that in the state of Illinois, there are 45,000, about 46,000 11th graders taking AP classes, which is about 32% of 11th graders in the state. Well, of that 46,000 almost, what's the distribution of students? What's the demographic of students in that number? And that's what this is showing you on the left. What's the makeup of students taking this early college course? So, and that would be AP 11th grade. And I can see that here, right? I can see that both the count, so there's about 22,500 white students, about 12,000 Latinx students, and so forth. And I can see not only the number of students, but also what is that proportion in that amount of 11th grade AP students, right? So it's about half of those students are white, about 26% are Latinx, and so forth. And if I want to know, well, in context, what does that really mean, right? Well, that's what this on the right-hand side, this other stacked bar chart, will add some context. And this is showing what's the demographic makeup of high school students. And it says in this district, in this case, we're looking at the state, right? So I can do a comparison. If I know that roughly 46% statewide of high school students are white, and I see 49% of them are of 11th graders are in AP classes that are white, I can see that comparison right there to look at proportionality, like Emily said. Thank you for that. And it really answers the question of representation, right? There are certain demographic groups that are overrepresented in these courses or underrepresented, and that allows you to kind of get a sense of which groups may not have as much access to these courses, and hopefully that leads to action, right? And that information that you get can lead to action. And so you can look at any particular district that you're interested in and see not only their trends, but again, what does representation look like in these courses? And we can filter this. Now, this is, again, a particular group. This is AP 11th grade. I can change this to look at dual credit 11th grade or 12th grade or all high school students, right? And not only do we have racial demographic groups, we can also look at special populations, right? Like English learners, low-income students, or students with IEPs. So for example, if I wanted to look in particular at the percentage of low-income students that are involved in dual credit classes across the state, that right there tells a story, right? I know what the percentage of low-income students across the state is, and here I can see, well, what percentage of those students are actually engaging in these types of credit-bearing courses. And that right there tells me there's an underrepresentation happening. There's more access that can be provided. And if I want to know in particular for my district, what does that look like? I can click this here and see what's happening in my district. Now, quickly, everything that I've shown you, comparing districts, and then in particular, looking at a district and their trends for each of the 3 types of classes, the demographics, breakdowns of students in these classes for representation. We can see this at a district level, and I've just shown you at a statewide level. We can also look at this at a regional level for each leadership community. And that's what this table is here. So you'll see here in this table, each of the leadership communities represented. And you can click on a particular leadership community and see not only, now this is showing us the snapshot, right, of in 2023, dual credit students, right? What's the percentage? And I can click on a particular community, like I'll click on Aurora, for example. And if I click on that community, then I go back to this view that I saw previously for a district. Now I'm looking at a community. This is the group of all districts in that leadership community. And I can see what the trends have been for each of these types of courses. And I can, again, look at that representation piece, right? Which here I'm looking at a special group. I can look in particular at the different racial demographics and see what that looks like as well. And so just not only at a district level, we can see at a regional level what's happening in certain regions of different groups of districts with these, with dual credit, with AP courses. And again, we can hone in on particular grades and see, if you want to key in on 12th graders and dual credit, we can see not only what have the trends been, is that going up, are we actually increasing the number of students in these courses, not only by percentage, but also by the sheer number of students. But also what is the representation been in these courses? And I didn't mention this before, but we're looking at the most recent year of data. So this would be dual credit in 2023, which is represented by this 40.3%, right? That roughly 2,478 students. Well, I can also go back and look at previous years of data, like in 2021. I can see again that same information, this percentage of students here. What is the breakdown of that as well?
Can I clarify one thing? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I don't know about anybody else, but this is so small on my screen. I'm glad we're recording this because I'm going to have to, when I get the link, I'm going to have to use your recording as a kind of a tutorial to go back over everything. But when Laz asked about how you switched from the state view to the line view, you said, check this box, but you didn't say the name of it, and it's so small on my screen, unless I missed it, I don't know where you checked. And then you said uncheck the box, and I'm like, what box? Well,
got it. No problem. Thank you for raising that. Of course. Thank you. So actually I'll reset this. So here there's a filter on the right under Illinois statewide that's called Find a District. And that's what allows you to find any particular district that you're interested in. And so there's at the very top of the filter, when you select it, it says all, right? And so that's the box that I'm saying to check. So if you were to check all at the top and hit apply, then I'm back to looking at the state as a whole.
And how did you get from the state view to the line view for the state?
There's 2 ways to do that. So one way is by clicking on a district in the map. Another way is by clicking on a district in the table. If I'm using the map is for comparing districts. The table is for looking at a single district's data, right? So
I still don't get how that takes you to the line view.
I'll show you right now.
When you click on it on the map, all it does, or it looks like on my screen, all it does is tell you about the district.
So I'll demonstrate that now. So let's say I wanted to look in particular at 2 districts. I'll do district 211 and 214. So I went to this find a district filter. I unchecked the box next to all, and now I'm going to type in the districts that I'm interested in comparing, right? So I'll look at district 211, check the box next to 211. Then district 214, check the box there, and then make sure that I hit apply so it actually does what I want it to do. And now I see these 2 districts in the map as well as in the table. Now, if I were to click District 211 in the map. So I'm hovering over it and it's giving me some information that's helpful.
Oh,
And
you're just hovering.
I'm just
Okay, to
hovering,
get that.
right.
I thought you clicked to get that. Gotcha. Okay.
No, just hover and it gives you this information. Then if I click and select this district in the map, now I can see the trends.
Oh, now I gotcha. Okay.
And
Thank
that's
you.
just a thing, no problem. And then I can, and I'm sure you weren't the only one that had that question. So thank you for asking it. And I can click and drag.
So you did the trends, and then you also got to the demographic side.
Exactly. So the map allows me to compare. And if I go to the table and select District 211, now I can see that district's demographic.
Got it.
Yes.
Thanks.
No problem. This is a new feature, so it's definitely going to go through some trial and error. So thank you for asking those questions, and always happy to go back and show things again. So thank you all for asking that. So again, so one more time, the map is for comparing districts. So that's what this view shows me. The table allows me to look at a single district and see their demographic data. Now, last part is I can look at a single leadership community's demographic data, and I can also compare leadership communities. Just like how I was comparing these districts, I can compare communities as a whole. And that's what this button allows you to do. That says compare communities. If I were to select this button, now I'm looking at that similar view from before where I was comparing districts, only now I'm looking at regions. And so here I have Aurora, which is just the first alphabetical leadership community, and I had it pre-selected to the state. So you can just compare that region to the state. And if you want to click and add in additional regions, you can use this filter that says leadership community, click to add more, and just check the box next to any regions that you want to compare to the region that you are interested in. And so you see the trends for that region as a whole. And if you go down to the table, it'll show you within that region, what are all the districts that are included? What are all the districts that make up that region? And so just by scrolling down on this table, we can see who are all the districts that are included in creating this aggregate view. This is downloadable. You can download this, either the line chart or the table. You can download this as an image for a presentation. The possibilities, there's many of them. And again, we can look at dual credit, we can look at AP, or just students in general that are taking credit-bearing courses in all these different grades. I will stop here because I think I'm at time. I appreciate y'all for listening. I appreciate the questions and the comments in the chat. Super excited to include more data in this dashboard. Just a quick overview. What's to come is CTE data, which we're excited to unveil. The plan is by the end of the month, and you'll definitely we'll get the word out for that when it's coming. And then later in the spring, going towards summer, we'll include graduation rate data as well as freshmen on track. So I will stop here. Thank you all for your time and just for your questions and for your attention.
It's
Certainly
really
very
excellent.
relevant to the. Thank you, Dina, for saying that. We agree.
It's excellent.
100%. Yeah, it's really incredible stuff. So I know Laura's getting slides pulled back up here, but just Mamusi, I want to encourage you to read in the chat all of the praise for the work that you've done here. We know it's been a labor of love. It's just been a labor generally. So I'm sure there's moments where it's been of love, and I'm sure there's moments where it's been less of love, but it's really exciting stuff.
Emily,
okay.
I think you're up next.
Yeah, so I know that, and also I'm sure that no one's going to be paying attention to me because now they're going to be clicking on the dashboard link and jumping around. Think about how the data you're viewing on the dashboard might impact how we want to have conversations about the policy and legislative updates that are coming down the pipeline here. But yeah, again, just every time Mamusi walks through the dashboard, I think I'm always just blown away at just how user friendly it is. I mean, and obviously there's always still room to grow, but like just how navigable it is and how readily accessible it's making these data that are so essential to our conversations. So I'm going to run through a few slides just around general updates on the governor's budget proposal, as well as some federal budget proposal highlights. and a handful of bills that are popping up. Legislative session is still very much, it seems like very much still in the early days in some senses, and then there are other things that are just kind of popping off. So we'll go through a handful of those things, and I'm going to give Amy Galvin from STAND a minute to talk about one of the bills in particular that is impacting dual credit. But feel free to drop questions and thoughts in the chat, but I'm going to run through some of these. Some of this might be a repeat for those of you who joined us at the Success Network conference and were with Laura and I in our session there, but there's some new stuff as well. So just running through some highlights from the governor's budget proposal having to do with education. Included in the proposal was, there's some increases, including the kind of annual increase for evidence-based funding, but also a $10.2 million increase for funding for CTE, which coincides with ISB's new CTE funding formula that is supposed to be based more in the previous CTE funding formula had a larger emphasis on just sort of offering of courses versus enrollment in those courses and participation in those courses. The new funding formula shifts the focus to enrollment so that the incentive is to be encouraging students to participate in these college and career readiness opportunities. There was an increase for the MAP grant program. That's our need-based state need-based aid program. And so $10 million increase for MAP. I know that there are a lot of advocates on this call who have advocated for more than that, and and also a greater increase on the evidence-based funding formula. But this is where we're at in a resource-constrained environment this year. And then just wanted to flag a handful of things that were kind of continued funding or flat funding in this year's proposed budget. And again, certainly with all of these things, we'll see what happens with the legislative session and what ends up in the final enacted budget versus what the governor has proposed here. But so some of the flat funding here has been extending the common application for transfer students, dual credit funding to ICCB. We were particularly excited to see that. We thought that that was a really exciting move in this previous fiscal year or the current fiscal year that the governor had made, and that had been ultimately funded by the legislature to fund capacity at ICCB around coordination for dual credit. ICCB's been, as a result, staffing up on dual credit. They've been putting out some grant funding on that as well. So we're excited to see this continued funding to ICCB to help with that coordination. There's more, continued funding for Golden Apple and the Minority Teachers of Illinois scholarships, as well as the ISB teacher recruitment pilot that was funded last year, or these are proposed, obviously, still certainly. And then continued funding for the AIM High Scholarship, which is the merit-based scholarship that was enacted, how many years ago now? It's like 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. So those are some snapshots of the proposed budget. Again, we'll see how things shake out over the course of session. Certainly welcome friends that are much more involved in Springfield to drop reflections in the chat of where you think things might be going. But at a minimum, we're excited to see the governor to kind of maintain his commitment to education and particularly dual credit and CTE, and just finding ways of making those types of opportunities accessible for students. We can go to the next slide. Wanted to highlight a few things from the federal budget that President Biden proposed a week or so ago now. There are a number of things of note for this group. So in the proposed federal budget, there's $57 million for the Career Connected High Schools program. This is a program that was established in this current fiscal year. Illinois Central College is actually one of the first rounds of grantees. We'll be sharing all these slides out, by the way, so you'll be able to kind of click and learn more about these. But Career Connected High Schools, the program was a grant-funded program. Communities were submitting applications to do work that's similar to what our leadership communities are doing all around the state of Illinois and throughout the Success Network. So working together with secondary and post-secondary and local partners to implement career connected learning, so things like work-based learning, college and career pathway systems, et cetera. So we're excited to see this continued emphasis on career connected learning from the federal government. We think that, a lot of this work happens at, locally and at the state level, but having the federal government have an eye towards career connected learning is really powerful. Last year's Success Network conference, we had Amy Lloyd from the U.S. Department of Education come speak, and she spoke exactly about career-connected high schools and all this kind of work. She was formerly with Jobs for the Future. She's a real big advocate for the Illinois Education and Career Success Network, certainly. So we're excited to see that these values that we've been trying to live out in the network at the federal level. There also was included $7 billion for the Classroom to Career program. This is really focused on early college credit, really focused on dual enrollment. And so the idea of 12 post-secondary credits for free, dual enrollment opportunities for interested high school students. And so obviously, this is proposed. It's unlikely that $7 billion is what that number is going to end up as. But I think drawing the line in the sand at a federal level saying, hey, we recognize early college credit is a really essential strategy for college and career readiness. It's something that's really powerful. And so regardless of what the number ends up as, we think the value that's kind of being espoused through this proposal is really exciting to see. And then there's some continued proposed funding on teacher pipeline programs, which includes the Teacher Quality Partnership grants for teacher prep programs. So these are opportunities for states and communities to be implementing various kind of grow your own type strategies, et cetera. So not dissimilar to our state budget, there's an emphasis on career connected learning, there's an emphasis on early college credit, there's an emphasis on teacher pipeline stuff. And we can go to the next slide. So I have 2 slides on a handful of bills. Missing from this is the Dual Credit Quality Act amendment that Amy will speak to in just a minute. But I will talk through these 2 slides briefly, just to give a heads up of some of the things that are cycling through our education-related committees in our legislature. None of these are finalized or in any way, shape, or form. Everything is still very much in flux. I certainly welcome folks who are, again, much more directly involved in Springfield to weigh in on things that they see as maybe moving or not moving. I might be missing the latest and greatest information from Springfield here. So I'm just going to note a handful of these. There is work around subsidizing manufacturing employees working as a licensed CTE teacher. This is something that I think the Illinois Manufacturers Association has been supportive of for many years now, the idea of how do we incentivize employer partners to work in the classroom and provide that really contextualized learning in CTE. There's a bill to establish a workplace readiness week at public high schools. That is both for kind of workers' rights awareness, but there's also some pieces around awareness around apprenticeship opportunities and things like that. So that's kind of an interesting bill that's popped up. There's some work on financial literacy and digital literacy skills. And then there's a bill around addressing some of the tensions in the automatic accelerated placement policies and prerequisite coursework. Amy, I feel like you had a good way of explaining what the purpose of this bill was, and maybe I'm putting the wrong person. This bill is from Representative Ammons, and it's about addressing where, the school districts are required to have an automatic acceleration policy to automatically accelerate students to the next high level of coursework in math, English, and science. And this addresses where if a student has maybe skipped a grade or has skipped a course, not being, addressing where those students have accelerated without them being penalized for skipping over a course that they've qualified to skip beyond. Is that an adequate explanation? I'm so sorry if I butchered that. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up, Amy. Appreciate the reassurance. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, and I'm actually going to tap Kelsey from Advanced briefly. HB 5414 is about a stipend program for student teachers, and Kelsey, I'll just tap you to explain this a little bit more.
Sure, thank you. And I'll just do it really high level. So again, the goal of this would be to provide student teachers with a $10,000 stipend, as well as providing cooperating teachers with a stipend for the hard work that they do in supporting our new teachers. So this is in early stages, like Emily said, so everything's moving and shaking and people having really great conversations. But again, the goal of having a $10,000 stipend for student teachers. And I think it is a $2,000 stipend for cooperating teachers.
That sounds right. And Kelsey, if you want to drop your email in the chat for folks to follow up if they've got questions, I'm sure there are people who are intrigued by this. HB 5501 is a waiver around attendance, and it has to do with apprenticeship. So it's for qualifying students who are 17 years old or older participating in an apprenticeship program. It would help address some of the attendance requirements for them through that bill. There is a bill to transition the uniform admissions pilot program into a direct admissions program beginning in the 25-26 school year. There is a bill that it seems like it might not be going anywhere, but I wanted to include this because I knew PCC friends would be on the line. There's a bill to limit for-profit institution eligibility for MAP grants, but sorry, I'm going to go back. Laws, I'm assuming your question is on something else. So
Just the apprenticeship one, I wanted people to be aware
yeah,
that the Department of Labor put out new rules that would basically hinder and almost
yes.
eliminate apprenticeships for in-school youth. So it has to do with the change of the competency-based apprenticeships requiring 2,000 hours, which it actually does not, even though some people in sort of that are in the Department of Labor staff want to suggest that the 2,000 hours are there. And so as a state, we've put out position papers against that. So have a lot of other organizations, but just, if it's something of interest to people, there is a comment period for that, for those new rules. And that would
I think that comment period
eliminate.
did close this week, unfortunately.
Did it close? Okay.
I think it closed on Monday, but still.
Okay. So we commented and the state put out, and I'm probably still going to reach out to some of our elected officials to try to make sure that they get the message. So just wanted to share that. That would be a significant impact.
Thanks, Laz. Appreciate that. Jason, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on Laz. In addition to everything Laz saying being corrected, Laz, do I need to drive over there and get you out of wherever they've got you locked up today? Because that's hilarious. But anyways, putting the exclamation point on what Laz just said, two things. One, Illinois is definitely, as Laz just described, where Laz said we are. This summer, for the ISB Career Connections Conference, the keynote is actually a panel that will be in the middle of the day that is focused literally on apprenticeships, both at the school district and community college levels. So I'm dropping the link in the chat for that.
And we've got the info on that in our upcoming event.
Perfect, perfect.
Sure.
But so that's number one. And number two, I want to call out partially because I was literally teaching about this last night in our School Law for CSBO's class, the fact that, at this point, I think Laz's kind of throwaway comment at the end about reaching out to our legislators and their staffs, probably really important as a way to make this happen. We obviously have a couple of senators with some real power and then our reps, both sides of the aisle. So just wanted to reiterate everything Laz said there because some of the other ongoing work. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks. Yeah. So just to close out these the sort of emerging bills pieces, and just thanks for the discussion on apprenticeship. That is probably something we can definitely talk more about with this group as well. Obviously, it's been an area of work-based learning and those kinds of things have been an area of interest in this group. So I think we can definitely connect with you guys about what would the right grain size be for this group, and where can we offer some leverage and context for folks, and add some extra support there too. So appreciate the additional commentary. So I'm going to tap our PCC friends who I know are on the line around this limiting for-profit eligibility for MAP grants, and just getting a sense of if you're seeing this Senate bill going anywhere. It's certainly an issue that I know y'all have carried a lot of water on. But curious if this year feels like a year that addressing for-profit eligibility for MAP might be moving.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Thanks for flagging this. PCC has not been involved in this push specifically. It definitely is a policy area that we've explored and like attempted legislation in previously, but yeah, we haven't really been involved this year, so I can't really speak to behind the scenes what is or isn't
Sure.
moving here, but it's certainly something that we're tracking, and yeah, always happy to you know, talk more about why this is a particular issue area for us, and why we've explored this approach before. But yeah, I'll put my email in the
Thanks,
chat
Caitlin.
just in case
Yeah,
anyone's
that's great.
interested. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah. And then finally, just on my list here, and this is obviously not a 100% comprehensive list, certainly, because there's always a lot of movement. But there is a bill to create a process for establishing community college baccalaureate programs. Now, this is a perennial topic. It doesn't tend to move, but it's interesting to see how it comes up every year. And this is a slightly different flavor than in previous years. In some previous years, it's gone kind of the sector-based route that sort of pushed on early childhood education a few years back. That's how we ended up with the consortium that we now have. But this is sort of more process-based. So it's very interesting, an interesting push, and we'll see how those conversations shake out. But the idea here being that, not everyone can get to a 4-year institution, that there's high demand for a variety of fields for folks to be trained up in, and that community colleges could be positioned to, the idea behind it being that community colleges could be positioned to offer those kinds of training. Feel free to drop other bills that you guys are keeping an eye on in the chat, but I'm going to hand it over to Amy, who's going to walk us through the Dual Credit Quality Act amendment that is going to be heard in committee, I believe, tomorrow.
Thanks, Emily. So yes, it is slated for a hearing tomorrow in higher ed at 4. But first, I'll kind of get into the bill itself. So the bill is 5020. And I'll start with kind of two reasons for the bill. So next slide, please. This slide, frankly, the dashboard that we walked through earlier did a really good job of queuing this up. I think a lot of you are familiar with some of the inequitable enrollment trends around dual credit. Of course, again, that dashboard spoke about early college credit, which includes AP and IB. This bill exclusively deals with dual credit. So there's a lot, this information, the map there is from an iWork report, and then the gap there is, that's ISB data. But again, I'm going to go pretty quickly over this because I think just through the dashboard and the many conversations in this group, I probably don't need to convince you all that there are inequities both within districts and across districts. And so the map, I think, does a pretty good job of showing some disparities, across different districts, where some districts are able to have really robust participation and others not so much. And then you also see, and again, we saw this trend in the dashboard as well, that even within districts that may have really robust dual credit programs, we're still seeing some demographic groups lagging in that participation. So that's one reason for the bill. Next slide. The other is back in November of 2023, the Higher Learning Commission, which is the accrediting body for all Illinois institutions, they had a really big policy change. So prior to this policy change, HLC was very explicit to say that that you needed to have academic credentials in order to be a fully qualified instructor. And they defined academic credentials as a master's degree relevant to the degree that they were teaching, or a master's degree in any subject with some graduate coursework for the subject that's going to be taught. The policy change eliminated that definition and really opened up the doors for 3 different pathways to become a fully qualified instructor. That is achievement towards academic credentials, progress towards academic credentials, and equivalent experience. And you can see on the slide here some summaries of what HLC uses to define those terms. But what you won't see is that reference to that master's degree. And then progress towards academic credentials, you'll see there's not a set number. It says, you must have 18 graduate credit hours or 9 graduate credit hours. It's much more ambiguous. And then equivalent experience, they give some information there, but it's very kind of loose. It says it could include some combination. So the Dual Credit Quality Act, as currently drafted, does not have instructor qualifications. It says that institutions may use it basically refers to the old HLC policy, and says, you know, institutions may use what HLC says. With this change in HLC policy, we have basically lost any kind of standardization, uniform credentialing, or basically quality control for instructors. So this is where the bill steps in as well. So those were the two reasons, is we're seeing some inequitable access across districts and within districts, but then we're also, this HLC policy change really shifted the groundwork of the Dual Credit Quality Act. Next slide, please. So what's in this bill? So the bill has essentially 3 goals, and I'll walk through them. And then within those 3 goals, there's lots of different kind of pieces and nuggets in the bill to hopefully help the bill achieve those goals. So one goal, as you know, we talked about, is to let's find ways to engage more students. The research out there around dual credit is pretty clear that if we can strengthen our eligibility measures, we can get more students in these courseworks. So the bill ties the eligibility cut scores and eligibility criteria to DARA, which is the Developmental Education Reform Act. It was in 2021, and it had, again, multiple measures and ways to evaluate students' readiness for community college coursework, and then we would use that for dual credit. We also found, you know, there's a lot of research, and we had some survey data that said these courses need to be communicated really clearly to students and families, and done over and over and over again. So the bill has some language in there to say that all dual credit courses have to be clearly designated in course catalogs, curriculum guides, and all districts have to have a communication plan for how to get this information out to students and their families. And then we're going to require a little bit more annual reporting from ICCB, just to, again, better understand some of the dual credit participation and inform a lot of the data work that this group does, and some of that dashboard data. And then a really exciting piece is we bring parity for CTE priority career pathway courses. So a school district may offer any IAI course as a dual credit course. We would add, or the bill here would add priority career pathway courses to that list, which we hope, again, will open the doors to more students who are less interested in, say, those IAI courses, which may exist, but maybe pursuing those CTE career pathways. But they do have to be an established pathway at the community college, and this is obviously to promote synergy and local partnership. Next slide, please. The next piece of this, the next goal of the bill is to help more educators become fully qualified. So one way that we do that is the professional development plans. Some colleges accepted them, some did not, because they were kind of worried about HLC. With the HLC policy change, PDP plans are a valid pathway to get fully credentialed. So we eliminate those sunset deadlines. There's a deadline for enrolling into professional development plans in a few years. And then there's a deadline for when basically PDP plan as an option would go away. We get rid of both of those sunset deadlines. Instructors would still have 3 years to complete that PDP. They would still have to coordinate with their college and coordinate with ISB to get enrolled in. So no substantive changes essentially to what once you enter that PDP, just making sure that it's allowed to exist in perpetuity. The other piece is those instructor qualifications. So as I said, the HLC policy change introduced those 3 different pathways. There are a lot of ambiguity there. So we, in this bill, established a dual credit committee. Right now, that committee has 29 individual seats on there, and it is split 50-50 between post-secondary and secondary. It includes chief academic officers, it includes districts, it includes faculty, presidents and trustees of community colleges, rural schools, an EFE spot. So there's a lot of different voices that will come together at that committee to determine a framework that will define those 3 HLC pathways. So, you know, what is the threshold for progress towards credential? What kind of combination of factors should we look at for equivalent experience? That framework would be, that committee would be charged with creating the framework that would give some definitions for that. And then the bill does codify the requirement that academic credentials means a master's degree within the discipline to be taught, or a master's degree and not more than 18 graduate hours in the appropriate field. So that was the existing definition. We codify that. So if there are changes in a HLC law in the future, that is the standard that Illinois is using going forward. And so that's the first time that academic credentialing is codified. And we hope that will help with some clarity. And then our third and final goal, next slide, please, is strengthening local partnerships. And we do this in kind of 3 different buckets. So first and foremost, the bill introduces an opt-out clause. So if a community college, if a high school has a partnership with their local community college and they want to offer a particular course and the college disapproves of that course documentation or withdraws their approval, the high school will have some course of regress that they will be able to seek an alternative provider. And there's some timelines and notification and stuff there in the bill. But it would allow, it essentially allows that if a college for their own reasons is unable to offer that course essentially doesn't just, students don't just miss out on that course. There's another option for high schools to pursue that course. There is also a new clause in there that high schools may appeal to ICCB if an instructor's credentials are disapproved. So as a college, if you have that partnership and a college says, hey, we're not going to accept this instructor's credentials, the high school can go to ICCB and ICCB will make a judgment. Even if ICCB judges in the college's favor, the high school can still seek out that alternative provider. But we're hoping that this will, one, engage ICCB in some of these disputes around credentialing, and 2, hopefully keep these partnerships local. It's better for students, it's better for communities if secondary and post-secondary are kind of working hand in glove on these. It helps with the transition work to community colleges for pathways. And so this would hopefully allow an agency to step in and act a little bit as an arbiter to make sure that these instructors are being as many instructors as are possible, while maintaining that rigor and high quality instruction, are able to get out there and teach these courses. We think that's really critically important with the teacher shortage, which I think everybody on this group is very familiar with. And then we did allow community colleges will have an opportunity to reevaluate that course disapproval annually. So if a year passes and the college says, hey, we've had some changes here, we're able to offer that course now, they could then bring that back under their local umbrella. So while it does allow for alternative providers, there's a lot of incentives to try to keep these local and frankly, to hopefully smooth a lot of the kind of bumps in the partnerships and hopefully lead to stronger partnerships and cooperation among secondary and post-secondary. There is their high school district policy. High schools are able to defer to their district policies in a few instances, which we think will help with logistics, particularly around enrollment caps, student technology access and usage, and student accommodations. And this is for if the course is taught by the high school instructor at the high school. And then same if it's taught at a high school by a high school instructor, high school districts may defer to their district policies for course length and the number of sections, but they would need to do that in coordination with their higher learning partner to make sure that those 2 changes wouldn't impact rigor or course delivery and student outcomes, which of course are quintessential to making sure that these courses are still college courses and high quality rigorous. And then the last piece there is it gives dual credit courses equal weight with IB and AP courses. So some stories we've heard from the field is, hey, the student's trying to be a valedictorian. They don't want to take the dual credit course because they can weight their GPA with these AP courses, et cetera. Or, a student is worried about college admissions that, if everybody else has a 4.2 GPA and they do not. This would allow districts, if they do weight those courses heavier, that they could then weight the dual credit courses with the equal weight. And then finally, it introduces language that holds all institutions. So whether it is a public, a private, a 4-year, a 2-year, an in-state and out-of-state, everybody who offers dual credit to Illinois students needs to follow the same standards established by Dual Credit Quality Act. For those in the weeds on the bill, it's section 16. It lays out all of the things that have to be done in a partnership agreement. And it really is where the rubber meets, the road on balancing student access with rigor. And so every partnership will have to meet those standards. So even if a high school does seek an alternative provider, those standards would still have to be upheld. And that's of course to maintain uniform standards across the state and to make sure these courses are high quality. And then if we strengthen some of the language around the use of out-of-state institutions, and it simply says that a high school has to demonstrate to IBHE that they've taken the appropriate steps to use in-state institutions, and then they have to provide the rationale. And again, this also speaks to a lot to student access, that if a student is taking a dual credit II course, of course, by nature of it being in an II course, they can then that credit is portable to any Illinois institution. If a district is partnering out of state, they would lose those transfer protections. So this is a way to keep these partnerships local, but then also make sure that those students' credits are transferring, and that there's clear communication there that makes sure that these credits are the students essentially are getting the best bang for their buck. And then it does codify the community college's right of first refusal. That is something that's now been essentially best practice, but it was not explicit. And again, it says that community colleges, when a high school is starting with a course or starting a partnership, they should seek out their community college first. Again, the goal of this is to keep these local, to help students make sure their courses transfer, to make sure that they are in a pathway that will then lead to hopefully a local institution. And laws, I'm seeing credentialing excluded. Credentialing, I do, meaning what credentialing is, and what determines an instructor is qualified.
Yeah, because sometimes it's usually at the departmental level, and the faculty are the ones that basically make those decisions. And I know that there are some agreements that have some language protections in there. And I think I know the answer to that. I'm just wondering do we think this would take precedent over? I would think so, but I just wanted to make sure there was awareness of that.
We've got a clause in there that basically says if you are considered fully credentialed prior to this act, you will consider to continue to be credentialed under this act. So a goal is not to lose any instructors through this. But then we also say that the dual credit, the instructor framework is a framework for determining credentialing. And so there's 3 paths for credentialing. If they are meeting these academic criteria, they would be, credentialed. If they're, and then the college faculty and the institution would then be able to say, how do we want to credential this individual? Are we going to credential them through which one of these 3 paths? And so it wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't like erode away anything that's already being done at the college, I think, at that point. And they would still have that say over how do we determine this person is fully qualified? We're going to use one of these 3 pathways. Does that answer your question?
I think mostly, I just wanted to create awareness that there are some people that have it in their contract, so that I could see there being some education that goes along after the fact, that community colleges or higher ed institutions need to do to ensure that there's acknowledgement or recognition. That's all.
Okay.
Thanks. So
that's fair.
And I see Rodrigo's got his hand up. And I will say we will need to shuffle off this soon here, but Rodrigo, I'm sure you've got a question or a comment.
I think both. I mean, to Laz's point, and Amy, this is something that just came up as we were with a community college last week. So in addition to labor agreements, right, which may codify the minimum, the qualifications, institutional policies have the minimum. ICCP sets the minimum, but many institutions have practiced to go above the minimum, right? And so I know we don't want a differentiated approach or process for faculty coming in to dual credit, to be dual credit instructors versus adjuncts or even tenure faculty, right? At the community colleges specifically. But I think that there is something here to be said in terms of ultimately, I think the goal here is to be able to go ahead and set a standard, right? And I know a lot of people in the field, we heard it a lot from school districts specifically saying, we want assurance, we want consistency. Yes, it's nice to be able to know kind of what the benchmark is, but if that benchmark is the floor and not the ceiling, then we are not necessarily making much progress, right? Because and again, I'm not trying to encroach on local control, but I think there is, and I know the committee ultimately is going to have to be charged with that conversation, discussion over the extent of that work, right? And that is a very, very huge task at hand. But I think Laz is absolutely correct. If this committee is going to be looking to go ahead and make sense of HLC policies and ultimately be able to design a framework, we have to make sure that we are attending to what we've heard all along with the inconsistency about how this is practiced, right? So just I guess a comment and or maybe a question to see if it's come up in your conversations.
Thank you for both. I would say I think you hit the nail on the head in saying that this is why we didn't. This is why the bill does not attempt to codify every single instructor qualification, and because that is a conversation that there's lots of different kind of avenues for that and different nuances out there in the field. That's why we did create a committee, essentially to create a framework that will take these things into consideration. And then it still is a framework for decision making. It's not a kind of a black and white. This is qualified. This is not qualified. That is something that is happening at the local institution level still. So I do appreciate bringing that up. That again, that is the kind of the magic of the committee. That is the magic of the framework that we're hoping to have, hopefully more guidance, uniform guidance, instead of having multiple layers of guidance coming from different agencies or coming from HLC, coming from DCQA, that it's all hopefully and intentionally coming from one voice, which would be that committee, which includes the many, many voices of the other actors.
All right. Amy,
Yeah,
where can people find out more?
Yep. So if you're interested in this issue, this is my email. That's my cell. I see some folks in the chat. Again, shoot me your email and let's find a way to connect. I will leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for the time.
Amy, if you can drop the fact sheet into the chat. I know I see Kathy dropped some questions into the chat. I feel like the fact sheet does address some of it, but maybe not. But I'll direct you to Kathy's question in the chat for you to respond.
You don't have to answer them right now. They're just things I was thinking about. And I know, Amy, I've spoken about the one with you and where students reside versus where they earn dual CT, where they reside, what community college district they reside in versus where they earn their CTE dual credit being in a different community college district when they travel into a different district for their career center dual credit. So you don't feel like the need to respond. It's just there for.
Message you, I'll call you. We'll chat.
Thank you, Amy. Lots to hear and discuss on that particular piece of legislation. So back to me. Guess what? You get to hear more about the transportation work group. So I feel like we have quite a few things going on with this group since we last had a full committee meeting. In January, we released the first of the 2 memos coming from this group. So you may have seen this kind of floating around on social media, on our website. But this is really summarizing the conversations that the work group had around what particular barriers related to transportation impact student access to work-based learning. So if you haven't already done so, feel free to check this out. I'll make sure, I can't remember if it's linked in the slide, but I'll make sure that the link is included when we send everything out so that if you haven't seen it, you can have a chance to go look. I think it should be linked in the slides. A little bit of a general overview. I know we've talked about, what came up with barriers and challenges before, so I'm not going to go too in depth into what's in the memo because I feel like we've talked about it at previous meetings a lot, but we organized the themes of what we were seeing in these challenge conversations in kind of 3 main buckets. So things that were particular challenges at the local or district level. So availability of public transportation, access to reliable private transportation, some more systemic challenges, things related to what types of vehicles districts can use, driver credentialing requirements and how those factor in with, overall staffing shortages, funding, how the use of those things can and cannot be used and how that may be limiting. And then just kind of a reminder that equity plays a role in these challenges, and things that we can consider to make sure that we're not, you know, perpetuating any gaps when we're trying to think of solutions. So things about compensation, making sure that we're meeting the needs of all students through various types of work-based learning opportunities. So that is a very, very brief overview of what is in the first memo. Like I said, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, it'll be shared with the materials for this meeting. I see there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat. If there is anything related to this and questions, I'm guessing it might be
it's just
about
drop the link to the memo. That's all.
Okay, I was like, it might be questions for Amy, but if there are any questions for me that I'm missing, Emily, let me know. We also talked at one of our last meetings about a student survey that we were looking to conduct, specifically related to students and work-based learning transportation. So I think at our last full committee meeting, I showed you some of the questions that we were thinking about asking. So we conducted this survey at the beginning of the year. I have some information to share with you all. This is very, very light-handed, like first glance information. There's a lot more that went into the survey that I didn't think we had the time to go super in depth. Especially we had a lot of important stuff to cover today. So if you have questions, you want to know more, I can happily share more. You'll notice this first slide kind of summarizing who responded to our survey. So we shared this survey through our student advisory committee at Ed Systems, the Success Network Student Advisory Committee, my bad. The Success Network Student Advisory Committee, the CTSO students. We shared this with some of our other networks. We shared it with the Policy Committee. We shared it with IWIN, so that people could share it with their students. So we shared it through lots of different channels, some directly to students, some to people who are working with students who do work-based learning. This is kind of a summary of who responded to us. So we have a demographic breakdown over here. You'll see, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting, we got a fairly decent representation of students, obviously with a few students we might have liked to hear more from. We got a pretty equal distribution in terms of grade level, which I thought was interesting. We had pretty split right across the 4 grade levels. And then this is one of the things that surprised me the most. If you look at breaking it up by community type, somehow we got a lot of responses, you know, over like 600 responses. And I just sort of happened that we had a very, very large percentage of responses that came from students in suburban communities. I think that it's interesting. It was a surprise. We didn't necessarily do anything specific community-wise when we initially sent this out. I think it sparked some interesting conversations, especially when we often find ourselves talking about, you know, work-based learning access within different communities. So that was just an interesting thing I wanted to flag. I can't see my clock anymore, so I'm speeding just because I'm afraid I'm running out of time. Something else that was surprising to me when I kind of broke down more of these responses, we asked students if they had participated in work-based learning before. We didn't want to limit this just to students who had, because, you know, we wanted to be able to capture if there were maybe students who hadn't participated in work-based learning for reasons related to transportation. And the percentage of students who already had participated in work-based learning was the smallest percentage of respondents, but the largest percentage of respondents were saying that they hadn't, but they would be interested in participating in work-based learning, which was pretty interesting. And then I broke out their answers for if they had participated in work-based learning by community type. And I thought a pretty interesting takeaway for me here was that even though we had the most responses from suburban students, the most students who had actually participated in work-based learning was from the rural students who responded. So I don't know, that was interesting to me. I think it sparks a lot of questions. Like I said, I can't see what time it is, and I know that there's so much more I could go into with these survey results. But
10:21 is your time.
All right, I'm going to keep going. But another thing that was a really important question to me that we asked was the students who had done work-based learning, how did they get to their work sites. And we also had asked some questions that I didn't put in here just for, the sake of brevity and kind of capturing some of the most important things, in my opinion, was we had asked students if they had access to public transportation and then if they used it. The majority of students that responded said that they did have access to public transportation, but they didn't use it. And I would say that these responses reflect that. So most of the students who had participated in work-based learning said that they got to their work sites either with a ride from a family member or friend, or in their own personal vehicle with or a small spattering of students that said that they use either school transportation, which is typically like walking or biking, or public transportation. We also did ask some more open-ended kind of qualitative questions. A lot of these questions were related to whys, right? So we would ask if students had access to public transit, and if they used it, and if they didn't use it, why? If they had a driver's license, if they used it, why? If they don't have a driver's license, what are the reasons why? So a lot of kind of giving them an opportunity to explain circumstances around some of their other answers. When it came to why a lot of students didn't use their public transportation, which was interesting to me, a lot of it was either safety concerns of taking public transportation or just the inconvenience of it. Some of them, they don't have to go very far, so it didn't make sense for them to use transportation. Some of them, schedule wise or where it's located isn't convenient to where they're going. Cost was a piece here. Cost is kind of a theme throughout, right? When we also ask students about what might prevent them from either getting a driver's license or providing their own transportation, cost was a piece that came up quite a few times, of either the cost of public transportation fares, the cost of a vehicle, the cost of maintenance and gas. Some students said, when we asked them this last question, right, of why might the availability of transportation impact their decision to participate in work-based learning, some students said it depends how far away it is, right? If it's farther away, that's going to cost them more in gas, and they can't necessarily afford to be paying for that much gas. Other answers that came up here, they get rides from family or friends to and from school or when they get around, but doing it regularly for work-based learning might not necessarily be reliable. And then this was one that I noticed we had a question that was just, is there any other context, anything else you think that we should, be aware of when we have these conversations? And there were a few, like a small handful of students who said that they didn't even know work-based learning was available to them, or they didn't know what the benefits were. And I thought that was interesting, because I think that speaks to some larger conversations that we often have around work-based learning, and kind of reminds us that when we talk about more specific barriers, that's also something kind of loops back around. So again, this is a very, very light overview. As we're wrapping up sort of this survey piece, we're moving into kind of planning and starting to work on this final memo around solutions and resources. This memo we're kind of organizing in similar buckets to the first memo, but a little bit different. So what are possible solutions that can be done at the local or district level? Sometimes we talk about like small p and big P policy, right? So what are things that at the local level can be done to help solve this problem? Statewide, what things can the state do to help make these solutions easier? So this kind of the context of that big P policy, creative solutions. I think of this sort of along the lines of like, what are some really unique, really kind of boundary pushing things that people are doing here? It reminds me of, if any of you were at our Success Network session, we had if you could make a wish policy. Like, these are things that might take a little more work, but are really, really unique creative solutions. And then resources, recognizing that this is a really complex set of challenges. And that in this memo, we're not necessarily going to be able to list every solution to every transportation related challenge, but we can share resources as well. So that's kind of the setup around the solutions piece. One of our next steps is going to be talking to people more one-on-one. If you're looking at these questions and these buckets and you have thoughts, please like share your information in the chat. I see that there's stuff happening in the chat. Share your information in the chat if you would want to talk to us about these questions and you have specific thoughts about these questions as we kind of move into finalizing the memo. We definitely would like to talk to some folks one-on-one a little bit more. Where am I at on time? 4 minutes. Wow. Okay. All right. Just a few wrap up and announcements. So kind of looking ahead, I know we've done this at a few of the last few meetings, but these are some things that we are thinking we might talk about in our upcoming policy committee session. So we have quarterly meetings. So we have 3 more this year. We are, if you look at the right-hand side, proposing some policy areas that we want to cover. So when we have a solutions memo, obviously we'll share the findings from that with all of you too. We're also interested in sharing some work around quality criteria for work-based learning and career pathways. There are some updates happening in the Perkins Model Program of Study Guides. And then there's also a lot of work happening in the state around competency-based education. So those are sort of some of the things we were thinking to kind of bring to this group and then to kind of fit in with those things and also have the opportunity to focus on some leadership communities doing some really awesome work that is related. We were thinking about leadership community highlights related to transitional instruction. So questions like what does placement look like, managing partnerships with transitional instruction, things like local advisory panels, and then CCPE currency. So how can local district policy be leveraged to incentivize students to complete that college and career pathway endorsement? So those are just some of the things. There's a lot of thoughts, right? And only 3 meetings left. So some of the things that we're thinking about for those upcoming meetings. And then just, reflections. If you have any thoughts about the stuff we covered, if you have some thoughts about transportation, let us know, if you're really interested in some of the policy stuff, connect with Amy, whatever it may be. Couple upcoming events. So we have 2 spring webinars through the Success Network coming up in April. One on April 23rd, one on April 29th. One about supporting post-secondary readiness through stakeholder engagement and continuous improvement, and another really unique one about AI. So how will AI transform jobs and pathways? So if you are interested in either of those, you can register. Again, the link will be shared with you all when we share the materials. And then a few other events. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. The PACE Symposium, April and May, depending on where you're located. There are 2 options. And then we already had a highlight for the Career Connections Conference. That information is here again. And then the College Changes Everything Conference is in July. So you can go just hit up every month some sort of conference or professional development experience. If you're interested in presenting at the College Changes Everything Conference, they're accepting proposals until April 8th. Our next meeting of the full policy committee is going to be June 5th. So you can register at the link. Again, we'll share these links and all this information in our follow-up. And then, if you have questions, you want to look back at the recording so you can follow along with Mamusi, all that's on the policy committee website. And that is the end. Am I good? Right on time. That is the end of our policy committee meeting today. Thank you all for joining us so much. Hope you all have a lovely day.